Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin this in just about a minute and a half. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. I think we're waiting on Secretary Adams to join us, but we do have a few opening comments to make. So good afternoon. This is certainly a topic that is very much of interest to everyone right now. It's what we're hearing about all the time. So we're happy to bring this webinar to you about the changes and what to expect with the upcoming general election. I'm Sandra Wilson, and I'm president of the Paducah Chamber of Commerce. And hello, Secretary Adams. So glad
Hey there, good to be with you again. Thank you.
We're just doing some of our introductions. So this event today is part of our public policy series, and that we offer that each year to have speakers of interest to our community. So we want to thank our sponsors for our public policy series. The first one is the deactivation and remediation contractor at the Paducah Department of Energy site, Four Rivers Nuclear Partnership, under the leadership of Myrna Redfield, the president and CEO. And the infrastructure contractor at the DOE site, Swift and Staley, under the leadership of Leon Owens as president and CEO. So both of those companies are very important to the chamber, they're very important to the community, and they are proud to be a sponsor of this webinar today. I'd now like to introduce the Chamber's Board of Directors, Vice Chair Brent Hausman with Baird, who's going to be overseeing this event today. But meanwhile, before I do that, as we're bringing Brent on, I want to just say that if you have questions during this forum, you can put those in the chat box if you're on Zoom. If you're watching this from Facebook and you would like to send us a question, you may send that to swilson@paducahchamber.org, and I'll get that to them for answering today. So thank you for joining us, and Brent, it's all up to you now.
All right. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate your time, and in the interest of time, we'll get right into it. The Paducah Chamber is actively involved in serving as the voice for the businesses of Paducah, McCracken County, and the surrounding area. The Chamber works hard to represent the business interests of our community with our local elected officials and our state and federal legislative delegations, as well as with other key decision makers. It's been my honor to serve as Vice Chair of the Business Advocacy Committee, which reviews upcoming local, state, and federal policies that are important to our business community. In addition, our local and state elected officials frequently brief the committee on topics or legislation that may impact their businesses. Just as the Chamber hosted a webinar about the voting changes which occurred during the primary election this year, we felt it equally as important to host a call about the general election. Joining us today are Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams and McCracken County Clerk Griggs. A native of Paducah, he is Kentucky's 77th Secretary of State. Secretary Adams attended public schools and was the first in his family to get a bachelor's degree. After graduating from the University of Louisville in its third class of McConnell Scholars, he attended Harvard Law School on low-income aid. In 2007, he began full-time practice in election law, first as general counsel to the Republican Governors Association and later opening a national practice in the field. Griggs was elected for her first term as McCracken County Clerk in the fall of 2014 and re-elected to her second term recently in 2018. Griggs has been an employee of the County Clerk's office for more than 30 years. WPSD Local 6 is live streaming this call as well, and we're also recording the call, and we'll post that recording later on the Chamber's website and Facebook page in case you want to watch again or share the video with someone who could not attend. As Sandra said, if you have questions during the webinar, please enter those in the chat box or email them to info@paducahchamber.org, and we'll be monitoring that. Secretary Adams, I had the pleasure of introducing you on another call recently, and I think the most important thing to local folks is you're a local guy and you know what Starnes barbecue means and what that is. So
I sure do. Red's Donuts too.
and Red's Donuts. So we grew up right here in our backyard. So we're honored that you would take the time to be with us today. And Julie, we appreciate your time as well. So thank you guys so much. And we'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's great to be back in Paducah, sort of. I was back actually last week. I met with the pipe fitters and the NAACP and did a couple of news interviews, and then spoke to the area development district in Mayfield, and it's great to be back. I look forward to coming back to Paducah and seeing you all in person whenever circumstances permit that. I'm also very grateful to have this platform to give you what I think is good news about this election. It's never been easier to vote in Kentucky history than it is this year. But it doesn't really help unless people know what their options are and how to exercise them. And so I'm really relying on groups like yours to help us get this information out to the voters. It's really hard for me right now to travel and speak to groups in person. So I'm grateful that you're making this platform available for us to discuss all this. Let me do this. I think in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll tell you what's changed since June. I think folks are pretty familiar with how well the primary went, not just by my lights, but we were deemed across the country as a nationally successful model of how to run an election in a pandemic. Other states have been looking to us how they can run a better election than they did earlier in the year. I'm really proud of that. As great as June went, on the other hand, there are some things I want to get more back to normal on. Partly because I think everyone's craving normality, but also partly because not everything that we did for June is fully scalable to a November election with 2.5 times the turnout than what you would have in a primary election. My projection at the moment statewide is 72% turnout. That's 2.5 times the 29% we had in the primary, which was a high turnout for a primary. So here's what's changed. Number one, we've scaled back absentee voting. It's still available for you if you need it. If you qualify because you're out of town or you're in your third trimester of pregnancy or all the usual reasons, it's there for you. If you're concerned about COVID-19, if you have an age or health condition where you feel that the best option for you is to vote at home versus voting in person, that's fine. The law already provided for that before I took office. We just made that easier than it's ever been before by offering a portal at govoteky.com where you can request your absentee ballot. For the first time in state history, now absentee ballot requests have to be verified via ID. We link into the driver's license database through this portal so we can check your driver's license. We've got a provision there in case you don't have one too. But most voters do. You can request your ballot there. You can also track it the way you track an Amazon package. Request your ballot at that website, and then anytime you want, you can go back to the website and punch in your info and see where your ballot is in the process. You can see whether Julie got your request, whether she's processed your request, and also whether she's received your ballot back. It's pretty nifty. We've never had that before. So that's available for those who need it, but we're also not making that the primary model for how people are going to vote. In the primary, 3/4 of voters voted absentee. That was at the behest of the governor and me, who both asked folks to vote that way if they could. This time we're not. This time we're asking people to vote in person if they can. We're giving them 19 days to do it, 6 days a week for 3 weeks. But also we're preserving absentee voting for those who really need it based on age or health or what have you. Right now we're on track actually for fewer absentee ballots to be cast in the general election than we had in the primary, which is pretty significant. With 2.5 times the turnout in the general, you would expect 2.5 times as many absentee ballots, at least. But that's not the case. Right now, we've had, as of yesterday, 580,000 requests for absentee ballots. That's up against about 800,000 requests in the primary. So we've preserved it for those who need it, but we've also made in-person voting a lot easier. We've done that in 2 ways. Number one, we've had great success in reopening voting locations. Julie is one of the leaders on this. She's got almost every precinct in her county, your county, open. It's different locations in many cases, but it's about the same number of places to go vote as people have had historically. We've had that success all over the state. Some counties have opened up every single precinct. Others, at least, if not that, have opened up a lot more than what they had in the primary. My office has been working night and day for 3 months to find poll workers. It's actually not really our job. It's the job of the county Democratic and Republican parties to go recruit poll workers, but it's been hard this year. Back last year, before I was even sworn in, I testified to the legislature that we have a poll worker crisis in Kentucky. We have an aging generation of poll workers who are not going to be with us in that capacity forever, and we've got to find younger people to step up and take those positions and serve their communities. So my office has been really working hard to find new workers on our own. We've found 5,000 just by ourselves all over the state, and that's helped our county clerks fill these voting locations. But here's the other way you can vote in person that I recommend to you, and I'm going to use myself. Don't wait until November 3rd. There's nothing magical about November 3rd. That's the last day you can vote in person. That's the 19th of 19 days that you can vote in person. You can vote in person on Tuesday, October 13th, or the 14th, the 15th, 16th, even the 17th, a Saturday. We're going to have voting open 6 days a week, all day on weekdays and at least half a day on Saturdays in every county in the state to help us manage the volume of in-person voting. We don't want everyone to crowd the polls on one day on November 3rd. That might be too much for our system. What we want is for people to spread out so we can ensure social distancing. And to make that possible, we've got 18 days of early voting starting October 13th, running through November 2nd, the Monday, the day before the election. This is a great way to cut back on the time commitment that it takes to go vote. I waited in line for 3.5 hours to vote for president in 2016 before there was even a pandemic. I don't want that this year. Need to keep people apart. So we're trying to get people to go vote before election day if they can. Again, that's how I'm going to vote. There's still the same 4 options you had back in the primary: absentee by mail, absentee by drop box. We spent about $600,000 here in Frankfort buying drop boxes for all the county clerks. If you don't want to trust your ballot to the mail system, just go drop it off yourself. Drop it off with the clerk in the drop box. Or you can vote in person on election day or before election day. Just really quickly, I'll give you the important dates to remember, and then I'll kick it over to Julie. October 9th, that's this Friday. That's just 2 days away. This Friday, October 9th at 11:59 p.m., that's when we close the absentee ballot request phase of this election. We opened up absentee ballot requests in August. We've had almost 2 months now for voters to request those. We've got to have an end date at some point. Otherwise, there's not time for us to turn these ballots around, get them out, and get them back. So the shutoff for that is going to be this Friday night. If you're going to vote absentee, then by all means, go ahead and get that request in, and then you'll be mailed a ballot. You can mail it back, or you can drop it in the drop box. Next day to remember is October 13th. That's the first day of 19 days of in-person voting. And then, of course, November 3rd is the last day of in-person voting. Our Constitution sets forth 6 p.m. as the close of our polls. That's the last moment you can drop a ballot in the drop box. It's the last moment you can stand in line to vote in person. That's also the deadline if you want to mail back an absentee ballot. It's got to be postmarked on November 3rd or earlier. For us to count it, if we get it 2 or 3 days after the election, we can't count it unless it's postmarked. You're taking your chances with that. The post office doesn't always postmark election mail. Their default position is to not do that. It's postage prepaid. So don't take your chances. If you're going to mail it back, go ahead and get it back to us. Better yet, put it in the drop box. But if you wait to the last minute, there's a chance it won't get here in time to be counted or that it won't be postmarked. So if you're going to vote that way, I encourage you to vote as soon as you can. What I found in politics is most voters are pretty opinionated. They know how they're going to vote, Republican or Democrat or what have you. If you know how you're going to vote, then go ahead and vote. Go vote in person early or get that absentee ballot back early. If you're taking your time, making up your mind, I'm not going to rush you. Go ahead and be an informed voter. But if you're one of the 95% of voters who already has a strong opinion, just go ahead and vote. We've made it really easy for you. Thanks so much.
Are we on to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, because it's, these webinars and forums that do help us get the word out. with it being different options and things, it is a little more confusing to voters this time. So this definitely helps us, get the word out on how things, the different opportunities that they have. I think I just want to speak probably a little more to the local level as far as what's going on here in McCracken County. I checked earlier today, and as of just a couple hours ago, the total number of applications for the mail-in ballots we received so far are 8,714. Of course, in the primary, I think we issued between 15 and 16,000. So right now we're at about half, which is kind of what we anticipated. So yeah, the mail-in voting is going to be significantly less. And I think it is because, the in-person voting has been encouraged. And the early voting opportunities, we are definitely trying to push that just to alleviate some of the long lines on election day. Here in McCracken County, we are opening up 12 voting locations. 11 of those will be, like we say, ballot specific or precinct specific. We have mostly 4 to 5 precincts that we have combined into one voting location. So you're going to be voting according to, like whatever school district you live in, maybe your state rep district, that sort of thing. Now we are having one super center voting location, and that will be down here at the courthouse in the county clerk's office. So anyone in the county can come down here on election day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and vote here in the clerk's office. So like if your assigned voting location is not convenient for you to go to during those hours, you can come down here to the clerk's office and vote here, anyone in the county. I don't know if y'all want me to go through, I'm not going to go through, precincts, but I do want to go ahead and name the voting locations. They will be Reedland Middle School, Reedland Elementary School, the Knights of Columbus at St. John, Lone Oak Elementary School, Paducah Middle School, Paducah Tillman, Emma Morgan Elementary, Hendron Lone Oak Elementary, Concord Elementary, McCracken County High School, and Heath Middle School. And all of those voting locations at schools will be held in the gymnasiums so that we're able to socially distance people 6 feet apart. We'll be cleaning and sanitizing all the voting stations and that sort of thing. As far as the early voting that does start next week on the 13th, that will be here in the county clerk's office. Our hours will be 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday and 9 to 1 on Saturdays. So anybody in the county can come down here and vote early starting the 13th. And like I said, that's what we're really trying to encourage voters to do. If they know how they want to vote, we'll be starting that up next Tuesday, and anybody in the county can come down here and vote. I think voters they're starting to see the postcards come in this week. I had postcards mailed out to all of our registered voters here in the county that explains their new voting location, where that will be, but also it explains the early voting options. So you should start seeing that, because that is one thing we're getting a lot of phone calls on. It's like, where do I go vote? I know it's different this time. So I did have postcards sent out. So you should start seeing those. I know I've seen some come in this week. So that will give you all your voting information on there that you should need. As far as the deadlines, yeah, the deadline to request an absentee ballot is this Friday. Like I said, with us being at 8,700 right now, I think we're probably going to push about 9,000 by the time this is over. But, I do want to thank Secretary of State Adams and the governor for all the options that you all made available for this election. It's just, yes, it's been a lot of work, but really it has gone smoothly, considering what all we have to do. But we do thank you. Thank you for always answering our questions, and you have a great team up there and as the State Board of Elections, and we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, Julie, thank you all for your work at the local level as well. I know I was in the courthouse a couple of times during primary election time, and it was hopping to say the least. So if
Yeah.
for some reason someone doesn't get a postcard in the mail and
Mhm.
they didn't jot that down as you went through them, is there a place that someone can go to find those? Where is that listed? Where someone could find those polling locations?
The voting locations.
Is there something easier than calling your office? I hate to keep
Right.
calling.
Yeah, I'm going to have that put on our McCracken County Clerk website and also on the McCracken County Clerk Facebook page. And I know West Kentucky News is going to come down Friday and do an interview with me, and he's going to run those in that publication, and they will also be in the Paducah Sun.
Great. Okay. And either one of you or both of you, if you want to talk about, I know with the primary election, there was kind of a, for lack of a better term, a delay, or it took some extra time to get those ballots counted. What do the deadlines look like for the general election? I know that was one change different from primary.
We're going to count the votes a lot faster in November than we did in June. We actually, we're not alone. Every state that's voted in the pandemic has taken a week to count their ballots because they've been more reliant on absentee voting. But I also think that we can do better than that. So I think we'll be one of very few states in the country that will have results on election night that are pretty comprehensive. They won't be total, but they'll be the vast majority of votes. I think probably 80 or 85% will be counted election night and reported to the public. And here's how we're able to do that. Number one, most voters are going to vote in person this time. It's much faster to count those votes because they're on machines and you just hit the button on the machine and there's your total.
Sure.
Instead of 75% voting absentee, it'll be maybe a third voting absentee this time. We had 25% of the votes in election night last time because 25% voted in person. This time it'll be 2/3. So just that by itself means we're going to have a lot more votes to report. But also this time we're ahead of the curve on processing the absentee ballots. They were prepared quicker this time. They were sent out quicker this time. We didn't belabor our clerks with early voting and absentee ballot processing at the same time. This time we put that into tiers, stages. So what that means is I think we'll have most absentee votes in earlier this time, and we're permitting the clerks to go ahead and process those on a as received basis. They don't count them in a literal sense. They don't push the button on the machine to say, here's the total for Trump or for Biden. It's still blind. We don't know how the votes come out. We just know that they've been in the machine. They're just like an election day machine before you push the button for the totals. So we're going to have most of the absentees counted election night plus all the in-person counted election night. That's going to be 80-85% of the vote total, maybe even more than that. Kentucky historically is one of the first states to report our results. And I think we're going to be that on election night this year too.
Can one of you all speak to that? So the actual machine, so when we feed our ballots in, the machine actually can record those and store that information.
That's right.
For an extended period of time. And so that information, you talk about hitting the button and running the report, each one of those voting machines or boxes is actually tabulating as those are going in.
Right. All we see is that 101, 102, 103 ballots have been run through. But we don't see what the results of the election is until we hit the button to close out the machine and give us a tape with all the totals on it. So we're waiting until the polls close to do that. We don't want to know. We don't want anyone to find out what the totals are from any machine. We keep all that secret until the polls close. And then we have all these machines that we zero out and we'll have all those results on election night. We'll still have to wait a few days for final absentee ballots to come in that were timely cast on or before election day. But that's not going to be a big proportion of the votes, fortunately.
Sure. Julie, back to you from a local standpoint. Will you guys still be posting results of what you have come in and what you've counted? Will you still post results at the courthouse like you've previously done?
Yes. And also, to go back to the cutoff for requesting an absentee ballot, that's going to help us tremendously for the general election, because in the primary, voters were able to request a ballot all the way up until like a week before the election.
Right.
So we were voting in person and still doing, we were starting to process ballots and then still issuing them. And it was just a lot of confusion. So this time when the deadline to request a mail-in ballot, after that takes place, then we're going to start in-person voting. So I think, like Secretary of State Adams said, we're going to have the majority, the mail-in ballots coming back in earlier so that we can get those processed, because that was what slowed us down so much towards, as getting closer to Election Day. We had all of those to process and weren't able to release totals, as soon as what we had liked. So since we're cutting off this deadline a couple of weeks earlier, we're going to get a quicker start on starting to tabulate those. So really, yeah, it's just going to be the in-person voting totals mainly that we're going to have to come up with on election night. So, and then, the postmark, we got like 3 or 4 days after the election, they're postmarked by November 3rd. So we're going to have the majority of them, to be able to report that night.
Great. Secretary Adams, I commend you. I know it's been in national news, and local news, back and forth a lot about mailing and, removing, postage drop boxes. And, we've seen a whole lot of headlines on that. And so to have the drop boxes, I think is a great move in that direction. And, instilling hope and faith in the accuracy and will my vote be counted and so forth. So I commend you for that. Julie, will you remind us where the drop box is for Paducah, McCracken County?
Our lockbox is located at the front entrance of the courthouse, and we do put it outside through the day so that the voters can just walk up and put their ballot in it and not have to actually come in to the courthouse and go through security. So that just saves them a little bit of headache from that. But now we only leave it out during courthouse hours because we got security up there watching it. So it's just available Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. And now when we open up on the Saturdays, it will be out there 9 to 1 on the Saturdays because we'll have security here then. But I tell you, I'm seeing, like when we empty out the lockbox every day, people are really taking advantage of that this time. I don't know if they're afraid that maybe the ballot may not get back to us in time, if the Postal Service is going to be overwhelmed, but we're having large numbers of ballots already being dropped off in the drop box.
Good. All right. I think that's all we have for questions. Any parting thoughts, Secretary Adams or Julie? Either one.
One thing I should probably be better about clarifying is you don't have to have an excuse or an appointment or anything else to go vote early.
Right.
There's no difference between voting on October 13th and voting on November 3rd. It's the exact same process. I do want to remind everybody that we do have a new photo ID law on the books in Kentucky. We didn't have that before this election. It's actually a big issue that I ran on. I'm proud of that.
Can you
we do have
to us? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So photo ID is an issue I ran on and won on. I helped write and pass the bill. And I'm really proud that we now require a photo ID to vote in Kentucky, like our neighboring states require. But that said, this legislation as drafted was very humane. It granted exceptions to people who can't get a photo ID. The bill was written before the pandemic and unfortunately didn't recognize that context. And so I used my emergency powers under our laws to provide an additional exception for people who can't get a photo ID due to COVID-19. Either they, people who can't leave their house to go vote can't leave their house to go get an ID. That makes pretty good sense, I think. So we've got an exception there, but most voters, I think, are going to vote in person with a photo ID. So make sure you bring it. If you don't have one, you can't get one, you can sign an oath of voter. That goes to the grand jury like every other election material for review after the election. You can sign an oath of voter, and then you can vote with a non-photo ID. That's what our law provided for before this year, was a non-photo ID. But we did tighten up the types of non-photo IDs that are permissible. It used to be any sort of document, a bank statement, utility bill was adequate. I didn't believe that was adequate, so we've eliminated those. But if you have a government-issued benefit card with no photo on it, if you've got a credit or debit card, no photo on it, there's been some identity verification in that process of you getting that card, and we'll accept that with an oath of voter in place of a photo ID if you cannot get a photo ID.
Very good. All right, Miss Julie.
Just a couple of things. One thing, I wanted to let voters know that we do have sample ballots here in my office. And, you know, there's 2 constitutional amendments on the back of the ballot, and they're quite lengthy. So we've been trying to encourage voters to read those over, understand them, you know, make an informed decision, you know, kind of know how they want to vote on that before they get to the poll. Because like I said, they're lengthy, and that could create a line if they're going to have to stand there and read it. And also, like county clerks, our office staff, our precinct workers, we cannot advise or explain in any way, you know, what these are about. So they need to read up on them and make their informed decision before they get there to vote. But like I said, we have sample ballots in the office. If anyone wants to come down and get one, and they can be studying the ballot, you know, be familiar with it before they get there.
I've also seen those on several candidate Facebook pages. I saw them pop up over the weekend for some reason. I don't know if I've just had more time and paid attention, or if they just came out at the end of last week, but I saw 3 or 4 sample ballots over the weekend. So they're on Facebook. Is there somewhere, I know you can't explain or tell me how to vote or whatever, is there somewhere that I can go to learn about those constitutional amendments ahead of time if I don't have the sample ballot?
I know there was one county, and I'm thinking it's Hopkins County, on her, the Hopkins County Clerk Facebook page. Their county attorney kind of did a brief synopsis of his thoughts on it.
Okay.
You know, if you wanted to watch that.
Okay.
That's really all I've seen. But
okay, and that was Hopkins County.
Hopkins County Clerk.
County.
It's her Facebook page.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I tried to put the sample ballot out on my office Facebook page. And of course, that amendment's so long, people couldn't read it. And I think you can go. Well, I know you can go to the Secretary of State site, and the sample ballots are on there. But it's just so much wording to it, it's hard to see. But
Can I clarify, this wasn't our idea. The state Supreme Court ruled last year that the Constitution requires every word of an amendment to be on the ballot, not just a summary. I think it was a bad decision. The amendment that created the court actually didn't follow that process, but yet the court exists. So it's a little frustrating. They didn't really think very far ahead. Now we've got a pandemic. We're trying to reduce crowds, and now people have to stand in line and then take 5 or 10 minutes to read these amendments. They're very long.
Right.
So I do encourage voters to read those at our websites, to go ahead and see what they say and make an opinion about how they're going to vote versus waiting until they get into the booth.
All right. Very good. Let me check. I don't see any other questions coming in. So.
Okay. Can I just say one more thing too?
You sure can.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed here, and I'm sure other clerks are having a problem with this too, we're having some phone calls, voters that have already requested their mail-in ballot, and they decided now, they changed their mind, they want to vote in person. That's not an option this time. So even though we only have a couple more days, you know, that you can request a mail-in ballot, please make sure if, you know, that that's how you want to vote before you request it. Because once you decide that, that's how you have to vote, is by the mail-in ballot.
Maybe a trick, maybe throwing you a curveball here, but what if I request a mail-in ballot and for some reason I don't receive it?
Now, we can issue you another one, but
Okay.
if it comes to where it's closer to the election, then we can make an exception to where you would be able to vote in person.
Okay.
Hey Brent, can I chime in real fast?
Please do.
the regulation specifically says if by the 28th of October you haven't received your absentee ballot that you've requested, then your county clerk can do some paperwork with you to cancel your request for an absentee ballot and let you vote in person.
Okay.
But otherwise, elections are about making decisions and being grown-ups, and that's what you're doing when you vote. And make a decision. If you pick a way to vote, vote that way. Don't complicate this for your clerk and everyone else, including other voters, by being indecisive. If you don't feel comfortable trusting the mail system, okay. Take your absentee ballot to the drop box and drop it off there. That's just like voting in person, except there's no line. You get to see your ballot go in the bin, it's been received. So I would encourage people who change their mind about how they're going to vote, just take the absentee ballot to the clerk and drop it off in the drop box.
Sure. All right, Julie, one more time. Anything else?
That's it. I think that's it for me.
Thank you for the work that you do. I know 30 plus years. I know I asked you this before, but this certainly has to be the most interesting and challenging voting.
Absolutely. It is. But it's like I said before, it's been absolutely the most rewarding thing. That I've been more proud of this than anything I've done since I've worked here, because it was very overwhelming. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And of course, I certainly didn't do it on my own. I've got an amazing staff.
Right.
We all kicked in and worked 10, 11, 12 o'clock every night, worked on the weekends, but we got done what we had to do. And of course, like I said, the wonderful guidance from Secretary of State Adams, our governor, if we had any questions, they were always there for us. But just the fact that we did this, and like Secretary of State Adams said, Kentucky, I think, is just, other states have been looking at us at how we did this. And it makes me so unbelievably proud to have been a part of it.
Thank you so much, Secretary Adams. And we commend you for working across the aisle and in a bipartisan way to make this happen. And as Julie just reminded us, and you pointed out earlier, in a lot of ways, the model for states across the nation. So we commend you for your work on that. And I don't know if when you started in 2007, if this is what the day that you had your training for or not, but we appreciate the work that you've put in there for us and advocating for all voters, because it is it's everyone's right, but it's also, I believe strongly, that it's everyone's responsibility to get out and vote. So I appreciate your work in making that a possibility for as many as possible to get out and vote in this election.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you again for your time, for being on the call. This and maybe one of the highlights or advantages of COVID is we get to have you on more frequent calls and your face down here in Paducah. So thank you, Julie. Thank you for for Paducah Chamber. And the Business Advocacy Committee thought this was a very important topic leading up to the election. A lot of questions of how this process is going to work. How do I get a ballot? How do I, what are the deadlines? How long are we going to have to wait for election results? All those types of things. So another example of the chamber advocating on behalf of businesses and individuals here in the Paducah, McCracken County area. So without further ado, we'll adjourn this call. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.